Hello everyone, it's Jen. I'm back with another collaboration with Mary Polanco and a mini stamp set. You all love this so much, so we thought we would do it again. So this time we're using the sunnystudio See You Soon stamp set. This is from their newest release, and I will link this as well as the coordinating die down below with all the other products that I'm using in the video today. So as always, we're going to start off with a little bit of coloring. I'm going to color all three of the critters for you. And today I'm using my Ohuhu brush tip markers. You've been seeing me use these a lot. I am loving them, and they are just such a great affordable marker. So I can't recommend them enough. I'm just grabbing out some of my cool gray markers here for the shark. I want the top of his body to be darker than his belly. So you can see here with some of these markers, as with any alcohol markers, sometimes you just need to touch the lighter marker to the darker marker just to get that nice smooth blend. So that's what I was doing there. So for the body, the back of him, I'm using CG5, CG04, and CG2. And then for his belly, I'm using, I think I used the CG2 and then the 01 or the 00, and then blended that out with the colorless blender. Went ahead and colored his mouth pink and gave him a little bit of blue for his eye. So for the fish, I'm going to use an orange color combination. I'm using YR3, Y4, and YR4. Adding the shadows to the bottom of the fish and having it go lighter as it reaches the top, and then giving him the same blue eye as well. For the octopus, I'm using BG5 and BG4. Now I have the mid-range set, so I do not have the largest set of markers that they just came out with. And for this kind of aqua turquoise color, there's only these two that blend really well together. So you can see here I laid down the darkest marker, and then I went ahead and blended that out with the lighter marker, and then again just doing the tip to tip here just to get that nice smooth blend. And with doing this you get the darker, the mid-tone, and the lighter color. So the darker marker is the BG5 and the BG4 for the lightest. Just adding some black glaze pen here. This is a gel pen for their eyes, and then bringing in a little bit of white gel pen here. This is the size number 2, not 2, 10. And I really love this size for really well-defined highlights and little accents. So I'm adding some dots to the characters, and then I did the teeth on the shark, and then just adding those dots back into their eyes. I did add some dots to the shark as well, I thought, just to match him up with the others. My coloring's done, and we're ready to move on to the first card. So for the first card, I decided to use some alcohol inks. So this one here is one of the Tim Holtz ones. This is called Tranquil. And I'm just using some photo paper here. I have a whole bunch that never got used. So instead of using the Yupo paper, I just used this. And I consider myself a beginner with the alcohol inks. Not really great with them, but I have fun playing with them. So I'm just kind of showing you bits and pieces of how I went ahead creating these. And I do have gloves on just because I tend to get the ink all over me, and for filming purposes, it's just easier to have it on the gloves than you having to see my inky fingers in the video. So I wasn't really having much luck with just this first color. So I decide to bring in this darker blue. And this color is Ultramarine Blue, and I don't remember the brand name, but it will be linked below. And this is where I feel like the background really starts coming alive with those two different variations of the blues. So I really like this nice dark blue in contrast to the Tranquil one from Tim Holtz. It's just so fun to watch these move around on the paper. and when you add more ink. So I let that dry for quite a bit. And I'm just going to use an infinity circle die here, and I cut out a panel. I also cut out some cardstock and then a piece of transparency paper. So this is overhead transparency paper that I use instead of acetate. It's much more affordable and I just really like it. So I'm cut out a porthole die out of some holographic paper, and I just went ahead and adhered my transparency sheet there to the porthole die, and also just adding some foam tape there to the back of that. So I am going to add my alcohol ink paper here to a piece of cardstock just to make it a little bit more sturdy. You can see how pretty that looks behind the porthole die. So I am making a circular shaped card for this one. I thought all three of the critters fit well into this. I stamped out the sentiment from the stamp set that says "See you soon." Just trimmed that out with a fishtail banner die. Now I'm just going ahead and kind of placing this, you see me kind of putting it behind so I can see where I need my little critters to go. I will end up putting the sentiment on the front of the card, but this is just going to help me with placement. And I'm just kind of moving that alcohol paper around just so that I can have the area that I want facing up. If that makes sense, it really doesn't matter. It's all pretty the way those colors combine, but I wanted a little bit of that lighter blue to the top. So I'm just going to have these together here, that shark to the right hand side because he's facing to the left. The little fish kind of nuzzled up to him looking like they're having a conversation, and then the octopus to the bottom there. And I'm just going to add my stamp block so those secure nicely to that photo paper. Went ahead and added the panel here, the front panel, to that acetate, not the acetate, to the alcohol ink paper. And then you can see here I'm just adding my sentiment. So I will trim that off. And with the transparency sheet and the liquid adhesive, it does take a little bit to dry. So I'm just going to let that sit. I went ahead and cut out my card base just using some 100-pound cardstock. I've recently been using the Accent Opaque 100-pound for all my alcohol coloring and my card bases, and I'm really liking that paper. Super affordable and recommended by Mary Polanco. We all know that she provides us with great money-saving crafting tips. So moving on to card number 2, I think this is my favorite card, and I'm going to do some stamping here with the shark. So I'm going to have a few of these to the bottom. This set of cards I wanted to do a variety of different backgrounds. So I did alcohol inks, regular ink blending. I'm also going to do some ink smushing. So I had a lot of fun getting inky for these cards. So my idea for this card is to have all the sharks kind of swimming around to the bottom of the card. I went ahead and cut out some masks using some Gina K masking paper. So I am going to cover all of them up, and then I'm going to use my Distress Oxides in Broken China and Tumbled Glass. So I'm going to have the Broken China to the bottom. It's a little bit darker. And then I'm going to have that fade up and add in some of that Tumbled Glass, and then I'm going to have it fade right into white. So I'm not going to bring the blue all the way up to the top of the card. It turns out to be a really nice gradient and a soft blending from darker at the bottom to lighter at the top. And what cardstock am I using for this? I just ended up using the Accent Opaque for this, so I'm not using Bristol Smooth, and you can see that I still get a really nice blend on this cardstock. I do have to work at it a little bit. It might have been easier if I had used the regular Distress tools, the little rounded blending tools instead of my brush. but this works just fine. So once I get my blending done, I can go ahead and take off those masks. And I love peeling up those masks and just seeing the card come to life. Now, where there's a bit of a gap between the image and the ink blending, I will just bring in a paintbrush and some of the ink and just fix that up. Really simple way to hide those little imperfections when you don't get your ink blending right to the stamped lines. So my Distress Oxide ink is a little bit wet here still, so I had to be careful pulling up those masks. And for this little shark, I actually forgot to cut out that piece by his tooth, but you can see with the paintbrush that you can fix that up really easily. So I'm just going to color one of these images with you. I'm using my Copic markers this time, so I just wanted to show you the color combinations I used with the Copics, using C5 and C3 for the back part of the shark. And I actually blend that out a little bit with the C1 as well. So you can see here, I'm just laying down that darkest marker first, blending that out with the mid-tone, and then I'll bring in that C3. Now, my markers were so dry. So you're gonna see here that I actually don't get a smooth blend, and I ended up refilling these once I turned the camera off after this one, and you'll see the difference in the blending. Now, I did go back over this particular shark to get a better blend, but if you find that you've had your markers for a while and you're not getting a smooth blend, it might just be because they are running low on ink. So again, having to bring in that darker marker, just darkening up those areas that I want to be the darkest again, pulling that out with the mid-tone, and then leaving less space this time for that lighter area, just because I was having so much trouble with the blending. I did do the sharks at the top a little bit lighter, just because I thought there'd be more sun reflecting on them. So had the two to the bottom right a little bit darker than the other ones. And don't they look cute? So I went ahead and used my black glaze pen on their eyes. And now I'm just going to draw a tooth mark here. So I wanted the right hand top of the card to make it look like a shark bite. So I just went ahead and drew that out with my pencil and then cutting it with my scissors. Now, I found it easiest to do what I'm doing here. So to actually cut on a straight line and then go ahead and cut on another straight line. And I just mean, I don't know if you noticed, but when I first started, I was kind of following the lines of the pencils, and it just was not giving me a smooth blend. So instead, you can see here I'm cutting vertically and then horizontally, and that worked a lot better. So I'm just going to erase my pencil marks here, add those white dots back into the eyes of the shark. And for this sentiment, I'm actually going to use the Fawn Duh Nuh stamp set, which is always fun to say. And the sentiment reads, "You are jawsome." So I did bring in a couple of different stamp sets for the sentiments. I just don't have a lot of occasions to send cards that say, "See you soon." But if you don't have anything else that would work, you could definitely use the sentiment that comes in the mini stamp for all of these cards. So now I'm just going to work on my card base, and I'm just going to trace that bite mark on to my card base here. And then I can go ahead and trim that out as well. So there will be missing parts to the top of this card, but I think it adds a fun element to the card and just jazzes it up a little. I don't know, something a little bit different. I did make a card like this once before with an Avery Owl stamp set. Well, it wasn't like this, but I did the little bite to the top of the card as well. It was a cute little shark stamp set. So there we go. I've got that. Now I'm just going to line it up and make sure it's ready to go on the card base. I did have to trim up this one spot here. And then I'll just go ahead and add my card panel to the card base. And I did drop my glue bottle there, so I'll run it across the screen. So once that's done, I'll show you a close-up and then we can move on to card number 3. Card number 3 is really clean and simple. I wanted to use all the little fish and I thought what better than to have them in rainbow colors. So I'm going to just simply stamp this on to my card base, I believe. Nope, I actually stamped it onto a card panel first. So I started in the middle and then worked my way to either side, and I'm not going to have them in a straight line. I wanted some of them to be more horizontal and then others a little bit more on a diagonal. So I'm going to use my Ohuhu markers here. Again, 2 color blends. For the red, I'm using R4 and R1. I love using these little mini stamps to make really cute, clean, and simple cards, and this is a great example of that. For the orange, I'm using YR3 and YR4. And I will just, again, use that tip-to-tip technique there, touching the lightest marker to the darker marker, just to get that medium shade between the two. For this orange one, I did have to do it a couple times. Then I can move on to the yellow fish, and I'm using Y2 and Y3. So the darkest marker in this one is actually the Y2 and the lightest the Y3. If you're new to my videos, I always have the marker caps to the left-hand side of the screen with the darkest marker at the top, moving down to the lightest at the bottom. So for the little green guy, I'm doing GY2 and GY4, bringing back some of that darkest marker there. And then I'll bring that lighter one, but I won't go up all the way. That also helps give you that kind of look of having a third marker when you don't actually use one. For the blues, I'm using PB8 and PB7. Really pretty bright blue color. And then the purple is P2 as my darkest and P3 as the lightest. Now I find with purple markers of any brand, they are often tricky to blend. So again, you can see how the tip-to-tip technique really helps with those purples. And finally, I'm going to do some pinks. I'm doing RP1, which is my darkest, and then R10, which is the lightest color. So we have a cute little rainbow of fish going across the card. Again, bringing in that black glaze pen for their eyes, you can just see how that really makes it pop. It's such a little detail, but I love my gel pens. If you've been watching me for a while, you know that I use them all the time. So just adding some dots just to give them a little bit of character using my white gel pen and fixing up that white area in their eyes just to brighten them up, and in case I got any color in that area that I didn't want in there. So an easy fix for that as well. Had a little bit of trouble with that orange one, so I had to spend a little bit more time on that one. Now I'm going to use the little bubbles that come in the stamp set, and I'm using the Broken China Distress Oxide to stamp those. And I'm just adding 3 of those. I do decide afterwards, I think after I'm filming the card, to add a little bit of a darker bubble by the pink fish. I just felt like it looked a little bit off balance. And I'm using the single bubble here with the Tumbled Glass Distress Oxide. I will use the See You Soon sentiment from this stamp set, and I'm just going to line that up under my row of fish. At first I thought I was going to have it more centered, but I didn't really like that, so I'm going to move it more to the right-hand side underneath them. And I think that balances out a little bit better. I'm going to use my Versafine Clair Nocturne ink for that. Stamp that down, got a perfect impression on the first stamp. Of course, I did get my fingers in the ink, so I'm just using my white eraser to clean up those ink spots. And then I can go ahead and add my panel to my card base. I am going to bring in my Nouveau glaze here in a second. I felt like those darker bubbles were a bit too dark, so the glaze, which is almost like a glossy accents, or I guess there's no S on that, glossy accent, will just make these look a little bit more watery and a little bit fun. It'll also push back some of that color once it dries. So there is card number 3. Moving on to card number 4, I'm going to do an ink blended background, and you can see here I am using my Tim Holtz Distress blending tools here. And I'm going to use 3 different colors. So I'm going to have Broken China, which is the one I'm using right now, and that's going to be the top, and I am blending this on some Bristol Smooth cardstock. For the color in the middle, I'm using Salty Ocean, and then the darkest color at the bottom will be Faded Jeans. And so I'm really just trying to get good coverage for this first layer of color throughout the entire panel. And I believe this is cut a little bit bigger than an A2 size card. So an A2 size is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So I will trim this down once I'm done. I am just using a little piece of cardstock here underneath my fingers so I don't get my fingerprints in the ink. You can see there where I have a couple of smudges, so I'll just go ahead and fix that. And I'll also just work on blending where 2 of the colors meet. Really like how this background turned out. I'm just working on blending that, bringing the Salty Ocean up just a little bit more. I am going to add some water here with my Distress sprayer. I'll let that sit for a little bit, and then I will pick that up with a clean paper towel. Gives it that nice watery look. So there's the card panel done, and I'm going to trim this up a little bit. I'm going to trim it to 4 by 5 1/4. So there'll be a little bit of a white border around my card. Just used an old piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock there. I had attempted to try something a bit different. It didn't work, so I just flipped it over and used it for this card. So I am going to use the See You Soon again, and I'm bringing in my shark. I colored a bunch of the images off screen just to have them for the cards. And I thought I wanted to have the octopus on this card. It ends up not making it. I decided in the end that I thought it looked cuter with just the shark and the rainbow color of fish. So I colored these the exact same colors as the last card. I do want to make sure I have them in rainbow order, even though they're going from the top of the card to the bottom. Just playing around here with placement, not quite sure how I want them, but I want it to look like the shark has something really interesting to say to them, and they're all kind of listening to whatever secrets he is telling them. So I'll place that sentiment to the bottom right-hand corner, and then I'll have the little pink fish kind of near that end of the fishtail there of the banner. And then I'll start adding on my little fish here. I'm going from the bottom of the card, working my way up. Just kind of placing them on different angles. This would look really cute too if they were all popped up on some foam tape. But I just went ahead and adhered them down straight to the card panel with my liquid adhesive. So I'm going to have the little red fish at the top pointed down towards the shark, and then the orange and the yellow ones closer to him. I think this layout is really sweet. I will use the octopus on the next card. Okay, so here I decided to grab out my Hero Arts Unicorn white ink and stamp the bubbles. It didn't work. I think my Distress Oxide ink was still a bit damp, not completely dry. So I kind of ditched that thought, and I bring in my white Nuvo drops and cover those little stamped bubbles with that. Those first two that I did on the bottom by the pink fish kind of were not well shaped as circles, so I am going to have to try and fix this up. I made it worse by trying to make them bigger. I also decided to bring in the Nuvo glaze, so there were some clear bubbles as well. And I think this just helps fill out the rest of the card, just adds a little bit of interest in those areas that have a little bit of white space, or blue space in this case. So I just used my craft tool there to kind of clean up that little bubble that didn't quite work so well. Tap that on to my, what was that? My stamp block or my stamp? That went pretty quick. It just helps round them out a bit more. So here we are moving on to the fifth and final card, and I'm going to do some ink smushing. I haven't done this in so long, I forgot how fun it was. So I'm using broken china and the tumbled glass. Now, this is my first attempt at using the transparency sheet. So this is the same one that I use as acetate, the one that I was talking about with the first card that's really economical. So I wanted to see if it would work with ink smushing, but I was not getting the effect that I wanted. So I decided to scrap that idea. It would have been great if it worked. You can see I'm trying here again. Because it's so affordable, I was really hoping that it would work for this technique, but I much prefer using a little plastic baggie. So I switched to that. I find I get way more control with the plastic bag for this technique. And you can see there I am drying it in between the different layers. Decided I need a little bit more of a brighter blue color, so I'm bringing in the Salty Ocean. And I love the way that looks on top of the lighter blue colors. So I'm just playing around here with the ink, trying to figure out if I have enough. I'm just going to do one final layer here. Sometimes you get playing and you just don't want to stop. So you can see that my panel is a bit warped. That's okay. I went ahead and I laid it under some heavy stuff. I have my die cases that are really heavy, so whenever I have something that needs to be flattened, I'll lay them under that for a while. And I also added some fun foam to the back of that, which will help with the warping. I did add a little bit of splatter on top of my background. It's hardly noticeable. But here I was just showing you with this shark, I ended up bringing in a little bit of a blue-gray. And so he has a little bit of a blue tint to him, and I really like how that looked. So for this sentiment, I'm bringing in the Keep On Swimming from the same name stamp set by Lawn Fawn. I just thought this was cute, a good encouragement card. But the See You Soon would be really cute as well. And for some reason, I ended up getting ink all over my fingers. So again, the white eraser comes out. That thing is like my best friend in the craft room. I don't know what I would do without it. I get ink all over everything. So I did pop up my shark and my octopus on some fun foam, and they look really cute. They're hanging out in the ink smushed water. I am bringing in some boiled sugar heart jelly drops. These are by Trinity Stamps, and I thought they would be cute for little bubbles in the water. They're so pretty. Again, just had that ink smudge. I tried using the sand eraser, but I much prefer my white eraser. So I'm just trying to show you the dimension on those jelly drops. So that's the 5 cards. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I will link to Mary's video at the end of this video and down in the description box below. I cannot wait to see what she came up with this stamp set. We had so much fun doing the mini stamp set collab again, and I'm sure you will see more in the future. So thanks everybody for watching. Have a fabulous day, and I'll see you really soon in the next one. Bye!